Hello BookTube, Books with Banks back with another exciting scene analysis video today, and this is a fun one actually. If you're not too familiar with Steven Erikson's Malazan Book of the Fallen, let me just say that this book, Book 8, Toll the Hounds, is a bit divisive. Erikson employs new techniques to really explore more deeply and thoughtfully themes only hinted at in some of the other books in the series. There's also a lot more introspection and characters kind of sitting around in conversation with one another, waxing poetic about their lives thus far and if there's anything left for them to do. I, for one, really enjoy this type of storytelling, this type of writing. However, I could understand those who don't. All that to say, I have never actually met anyone who didn't thoroughly enjoy at least the climax of this book. And so we're talking about one of my favorite scenes that happens during this hundreds of page long climax. Here's your heavy, heavy spoiler warning for Toll the Hounds. Alright, here we go. We will be looking at a moment from the end of chapter 22 in the mass market paperback. This is pages 1147 to 1152. Let me catch you up on two important things that have just really happened pretty much simultaneously over the course of the last couple chapters. First, a serial killer's wife has summoned Hood, god of death, into the realm of the living in the city of Darujistan. Hood walked through the city as Erikson, through Kroop, kind of told us these little vignettes of death. When Hood, Lord of Death, is passing by all of these people. Hood eventually comes to find Animander Rake in the city, and Rake beheads Hood, just cuts his head right off. Animander Rake, Lord of Moonspawn, Son of Darkness, has just beheaded the god of death, Hood, and to do so, Rake used his very special sword, Dragnapur. Then, meanwhile, the second thing going on, all throughout the book, and especially ramping up near the end here, all of the dead prisoners slain by Dragnapur, that sword, they've been dead and chained to the wagon within Dragnapur. They have all been slowing down in their endless efforts to keep pulling that wagon away from the constant pursuit and raging storm of chaos hot on their tails. They've been slowing down because Rake hasn't been killing that many people lately to add to kind of the manpower to pull this wagon, this gate of darkness on the wagon away from chaos. So, while we have a mad painter and other friends monkeying about trying to birth a god atop the wagon full of weary corpses, the wagon pretty much has almost slowed to a dead halt. Chaos is fast approaching to swallow the gate of darkness that is said wagon. While all of that is going on, Draconis, an elder god, one of the most powerful chained characters in the sword, is thinking on what will surely be the final moments of his life after death and the existence of this strange, torturous prison world of his own making. Surely it's all about to end and chaos will consume the gate of darkness and all chained to that gate, right? Won't it? So that's all the setup. If you haven't read this book, hopefully I've done a good enough job conveying how epic and intense this book's conclusion already is by this point. But here we go. Diving into the scene, into the sword, here we go. Ooh. The force that suddenly descended upon the realm of Dragnapur was of such magnitude that, for an instant, Draconis believed the chaos had finally reached them, and he was driven to his knees, stunned, half-blinded. The immense pressure bore down, excruciating, and Draconis ducked his head, covered it with his arms, and felt his spine bowing beneath a crushing presence. If there was sound, he heard nothing. If there was light, he saw only darkness. If there was air, he could not draw it into his lungs. He felt his bones groaning. The torture eased with the settling of a skeletal, long-fingered hand on his right shoulder. Sounds rose once more, strangely muted, a renewed storm of wailing terror and dismay. In front of Draconis, the world found its familiar details, although they seemed ghostly, ephemeral. He was able at last to breathe deep, and he tasted death. Someone spoke above him. He is indeed a man of his word. We'll pause here really quickly. I don't know about any of you, but the beginning of the scene gives me this bizarre, unsettling, but also slightly kind of hopeful tone that I don't expect in a moment like this. And with all of the context we have and the hints here, we should be confident we know who this is, the skeletal hand, saying this thing so casually. But he's entered Dragnapur, in a sort of calm and reassuring way, which is a total kind of subversion of what we would expect with someone known as the quote-unquote Lord of Death. Anyway, moving on. He is indeed a man of his word. And Draconis twisted round, lifted his gaze, the hand on his shoulder rasping away with a rustle of lynx, and stared up at the one who had spoken, at Hood, the Lord and High King of the dead. "No!" Draconis bellowed, rising only to stagger back, almost tripping on his chains. "No, what has he done? By the abyss, what has Rake done?" Hood half raised his arms and seemed to be staring down at the manacles enclosing his gaunt wrists. Disbelief collapsed into shock, and then raw horror. This made no sense. Draconis did not understand. He could not believe. He spun round then and stared at the legions of chaos. Oh, they had been pushed back a league or more by the arrival of this singular creature, by the power of Hood. The actinic storm clouds had tumbled in retreat, building anew, and seeming to thrash in frustration. Yes, an interlude had been purchased, but wasted, all wasted. Why? This has achieved nothing. Hood, you were betrayed. Can you not see that? No. Draconis clutched at his head. Rake, oh Rake, what did you want of this? How could you think it would achieve anything? I have missed you, Draconis, Hood said. Another break. Hood's dry commentary is basically him poking fun at how melodramatic and apocalyptic Draconis is being here, when really Draconis does have every right to feel this way. But again, Hood is capable of reassuring us, at least the reader, in this weird kind of unexpected way. Why isn't he freaking out? Hood, just slain by a prison world sword that holds the gate of darkness, a gate on wheels, constantly dragged away from and pursued by an apocalyptic chaos. Now death is in the sword, along with all the symbolism and fears and anxieties that might come with a question such as, what happens when chaos overtakes death? And we as readers can see what Draconis is freaking out about. So yeah, this is really just an epic event taking place here, and we are so fortunate to be in the shoes of someone witnessing Hood's arrival in Dragnapur in all his calm, cool, and collected courage. That said, let's keep going. And he twisted round once more, glaring at the god. Jagged, yes, the mad, unknowable Jagged. You damned fool, you asked for this, didn't you? Have you lost your mind? A bargain, old friend, Hood replied, still studying the chains on his wrists. Gamble. What will happen when chaos claims you, when chaos devours the realm of death itself? You have betrayed the gods, all of them. You have betrayed all life. When you fall, Draconis. Hood cut in with a sigh, reaching up now to pull back the hood, revealing that withered, jagged face, the clawed lines of eternal sorrow. Draconis, my friend, he said softly, surely you do not think I have come here alone. He stared at the god for a moment, uncomprehending, and then he caught a distant roar of sound edging in from 3 of the 4 horizons, and those indistinct skylines were now seething as the armies of the dead marched at the behest of their lord. From one side, a score of riders was fast approaching. Hood, Draconis said, numbed, baffled. They are unchained. So they are. This is not their fight. Perhaps that is as yet undecided. Draconis shook his head. They cannot be here. They cannot fight the enemy, those dead. Hood, all they have left is their identities, each soul barely holding on. You cannot do this to them. You cannot ask this of them. The god was now eyeing the wagon. All I shall ask, he said, of the fallen, Draconis, is that they choose of their own will. After this, I shall ask nothing of them ever again. So who will claim the dead? Let the gods see to their own. The coldness of that response staggered Draconis. And what of those who worship no gods? Yes, what of them? What's that supposed to mean? I'll take a quick pause there. Hood is basically burdened and traumatized by having to rule over the dead and greet the dead and everything else that comes with this position for so long, for millennia that he's been doing this. He hates it. Even earlier in this passage, he's described as having lines of sorrow on his face, but he only asks the dead now if they'll choose to fight against chaos to protect the realm of darkness. And this is one of the last things he's going to do, that he's going to ask of them, as Lord of the Dead, because he's hoping, I think he really is just hoping for an end to this horrible, godly position that he's been, put in, that he's been in for so long. Anyway, I'll back up just a little bit here. So the coldness of that response staggered Draconis. And what of those who worship no gods? Yes, what of them? What's that supposed to mean? After this, Hood said, still studying the wagon, the dead will not be my concern ever again. The approaching riders rode rotted skeletal mounts. Ragged capes flailed out behind the warriors. From the advancing armies, countless standards wavered and pitched about amidst upthrust spearheads. The numbers were indeed unimaginable. Broken fragments of war songs arrived like tatters of wind. The realm groaned. Draconis could not comprehend the weight that must now be crushing down the weapon's wielder. Could Draconis have withstood it? He did not know. But then, perhaps even at this moment, Anomander Rake himself was dying, bones snapping, blood spurting. But there was more, here before his eyes. All the creatures chained to the wagon had ceased pulling the enormous edifice. For the first time in millennia, the wagon had stopped rolling, and those creatures stood or knelt, staring outward, silent, perhaps disbelieving, as legions of the dead closed in, a flood, an ocean of iron and bone. So the wagon finally has stopped. And the wagon stopping, I think, matches this unexpected and bizarre sense of calm that the arrival of a corpse army and the arrival of Hood, Lord of Death, has had on this realm. Just sends absolute shivers down my spine. And I mean, just the language he uses, a flood, an ocean of iron and bone, to describe the army of the dead. That's chilling, but we are excited for it. Like, we're starting to kind of root for this army. We don't know exactly what shape or form the rest of the scene is going to take place, but Erikson has really successfully pulled us into this moment. We are on the edge of our seats. Okay, moving on. The riders arrived, strangers all to Draconis. 6 trotted their withered mounts closer. One of them was masked, and he had seen those masks before, a host slain in succession by Anomander Rake, Segula. The marks upon this one told Draconis that he was looking upon the second. Had he challenged the first, or had someone challenged him? The second was the first to speak. This is the sorry shithole you want us to fight for, Hood, flinging ourselves into the maw of chaos? The masked face seemed to scan the huddled, bedraggled creatures in their chains. What are these, that we must now die again for, that we must cease for? Miserable wretches, one and all, useless fools? Bah, Hood, you ask too much. The Lord of Death did not even face the Segula as he replied, Do you now change your mind, knight? No, he said. I was just complaining. He drew out a pair of notched, rust-stained swords. You know me better than that. Still, oh, how I wanted Skinner. To lose him this way, by the tyrant, it galls. That is why, said Hood, you will not lead the dead into this war. What? I am the Knight of Death, the damned bony fist himself. I demand... Oh, do be quiet, second, sighed the Lord of Death. Other tasks await you, and you will not rue them, I am sure. Iskar Jarek, will you command in the knight's stead, at the head of the spear, driving into the very heart of the enemy? Okay. Iskar Jarek, this name, another pause here, the name Iskar Jarek is basically, it's the return of a familiar face, and we start to get this return of these other familiar faces that we see here. And something that continues, or this is something that continues our optimistic excitement for this battle to come. This sort of like seeing some of our fan favorites show up unexpectedly here in the sword during this battle between death and chaos. Alright. The one so addressed as Iskar Jarek had the look of a veteran among veterans, gray-bearded, scarred, wearing threadbare faded colors over his plain chain hauberk, gray and magenta bordered in black. At Hood's request, he faced the Jagged. We will harden the point, he said, with Malazans at the very tip, my bridge burners. Dujek on my left flank. Bolt on the right with the 7th and his Wiccans. He then twisted in the saddle to regard another soldier. Bruchalion and his grey swords, to the right of Bolt. Bruchalion nodded. I find honor in that, Iskarjerk. Skamar Ara, your Jakaruku legions to the left of Dujek. Hood, listen well. Beyond the spear, so many of the rest are so much dross. Their will is weakened by countless millennia. They will march into the face of the enemy, but they will not last. Yes, said Hood. Just so you know, said Iskarjerk. Just so you know. Return now to your forces, Hood commanded. Iskarjerk, send to me the one-eyed outrider, and Bolt, find my soldier, the one once named Bowden. There are things still to do. Draconis watched as the commanders rode off with only the Segula remaining, swords sheathed once more. Hood, he said, what is happening here? You will ask the dead to fight for us? They will fail. They will earn oblivion and naught else. They cannot succeed, Hood. The chaos pursuing Dragnapur will not be denied. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Again here, Draconis is so short in his pessimism and his lack of faith in Hood's plan and Hood's army of the dead. But then, do you not understand, or do you understand what I'm telling you? The knight snorted. It is you who does not understand, Elder. Long before he was Lord of the Fallen, he was Jagat. Lords of the Last Stands, ha! Sentinels of the sundered keeps, devourers of the forlorn hope. You, Elder, who stood time and again against the Teist Andi, the Teist Eater. You, who walked the ashes of Carcanis itself. Understand me. The dour Teist Andi and the suicidal Eater, they are as nothing to the miserable madness of the Jagat. During this tirade, Hood continued to stare at the wagon, at its towering, tottering heap of bodies. And then the Lord of the Dead spoke. I often wondered what it looked like, this hold, creaking on its wooden wheels. A pathetic thing, really. Crude, clumsy. He faced Draconis, rotted skin curling back from the tusks. Now, turn it around. Okay. And there you have it. Instead of running from chaos, as these chained souls have been doing for millennia now, with Hood's arrival and his army, he is going to get them all to challenge chaos and wage a war against the very concept of chaos itself, much as he, as Hood, once, long ago, waged a war against the concept of mortality. But, that's a story for a different time, a different scene analysis. Anyway, wow, what an epic way to kick off this climax. Or really, the climax of Toll the Hounds has already been going on by this point for a few chapters, but this is really the beginning of the big battle at the end of this book. Just the fact, or it just so happens that this big battle happens in this kind of separate realm inside of a sword. And I mean the fact that it's the Lord of the Dead, Hood, teaming up with the guilty and self-conscious elder god Draconis. His army, Hood's army, teaming up with those chained to this physical wagon manifestation of Corald Ghislaine, Gate of Darkness. It's all so fantastic and powerful. And what really strikes me when returning to the scene, though, is the sense of hope that you get here. These are brutal, painful books full of cruelty and suffering. And for Hood to now show up here in the 11th hour with this bizarre plan and this bizarre sense of calm and optimism, we can't help but root for him. Draconis is obviously worn down and definitely a pessimist after so long spent chained to this rolling wagon. You can't really blame him, but he's also the perfect pessimistic counterpoint to Hood. And through this conversation that Erikson set up here, even though Erikson presents it to us through Draconis' point of view, I'm inclined to say that most readers feel like there actually is a real chance that whatever Hood's crazy gambit here is going to pay off. And really, at the end of the day, I just love this scene for how darn cool it is. I mean, two of my favorite lines in the whole series are Hood just first saying early on, "Surely you do not think I have come alone," and then you see the armies coming. I can just so clearly visualize that, the armies showing up, coming from those other horizons, or Draconis saying that. And then, if we haven't already, we put together that this, inside Dragnapur, is the place that Hood's armies were marching to in a few scenes earlier in this book, where we see them marching somewhere, but we don't know where then. And now it's like, oh my gosh, surely you do not think I came alone. I'm bringing them. Of course he was. Yeah, and then, so that was one quote I love from this. Another quote at the end of the scene, closing it out, before, closing out the chapter, actually. Hood calmly saying, "Now turn it around," is just a massive fist-pumping moment. This all works so well to set up one of, if not my favorite conclusions to any novel, really, I've ever read. Great stuff. But I'm sort of starting to ramble a little bit here, so I can cut it off there. Anyway, thank you so much for watching another one of these videos in the series. Again, if you haven't checked out the other videos in the analysis series, or if you haven't been over to my channel to see what other books and series I talk about, please go ahead and check those out. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to get notifications about when my next videos are coming out. Up next, we've got a long scene from right near the end of Book 9, Dust of Dreams. Honestly, I don't even know what to title my video essay about this scene yet, because I want to do so without spoilers, but if you've read at least through Book 9, you might have a good idea of what scene, what really epic, kind of exciting, kind of out of nowhere moment I'll be talking about. Anyway, all that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.